Hello, everybody. You have reached the Tony Moze audio podcast, where in this segment, I interview tech professionals in pre-sales on their journeys, hoping to inspire you to make the transition from your previous career and into the tech world. This is the audio version. However, you can also follow me on other outlets, including LinkedIn at Anthony Palmozy, Twitter at Tony Moze, and YouTube at Tony Moze, where I provide you a different angle from my experiences as a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional. Today's guest has had an interesting path. I must preface this that the podcast you heard was recorded some time ago, and so the story of Kevin yesterday is not necessarily the story of Kevin Jacobs today or even tomorrow. In this segment, Kevin talks about his journey into pre-sales as a solutions engineer, but shortly after the segment, he took on the opportunity to get more on the sales side, and today he's a sales leader in the mental health space. For those who are considering pre-sales or just starting their pre-sales career, take these golden nuggets from this podcast episode and leave a comment below. So without further ado, I'd like you to fasten your safety belts and take a ride into the pre-sale side.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
What does being a sales engineer at Uber Flip mean?
Hey, good morning. So being a sales engineer at Uber Flip means that, very simply, sometimes as part of my intro, I'll say my role is to make sure the technical side of things meets your business needs. That's the very quick one. What that actually means is, like many other SEs, I work in a complex buyer journey. You can't just sort of raise your hand and be like, hey, I'm ready to rock. You have to check with different teams, make sure the right integrations are there, make sure the technology actually does map to your goals, in my case, marketing goals. And so that's where I come in to be a strategic partner to my account executives.
That's all. That's awesome. See, like, you have an unorthodox way of getting there. I think especially mine, my experience and history flows the same way yours is. And I find it super interesting. People have a lot of these myths about what it entails to being a sales engineer, the types of schooling that you have to go to, what you need for a bachelor's and a master's degree to become a sales engineer, maybe that you need to be a software engineer, but you have debunked all from what I've seen entails, from what a sales or a solutions engineer is. So again, I think this is an awesome thing, and I want to dive in a little bit more today. So you work in tech right now, but I noticed that you weren't always in tech. You were a radio and TV show host. You were a public speaker. And even looking at your first college degree, it was not technical. It was a Bachelor of Arts in English Language and Literature. During that time you received that college degree, did you foresee at that moment you would be getting into tech?
I really like Wired magazine. I love Wired. I've been reading Wired for years. And so there's always a part of me that was like, hey, maybe I should get involved with technology. That said, I was somebody who really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I would say on some level, I'm always going to be someone who's constantly exploring. So when I took English, I thought, okay, this is a great way. One, I enjoy it. And two, this is a great way for me to sort of understand people and understand the stories we tell and how we communicate. During that time, actually, was the TV hosting, the radio hosting. Those were things that were just available at university. So anyone who's watching this and maybe you're thinking about a sales engineering career or something else, there are so many opportunities when you're in higher ed or whatever it is to do things. These schools make so much available. So I was at Western, and there are hundreds of, maybe even like 1,000 different opportunities for a student to try things there. So that was pretty cool. And then one of the things that I learned was how little I knew in my undergrad. So I decided to keep studying, and then I did more of a technical degree after. And then in that time, it sort of became clear that I'd go into tech.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's cool. Yeah, so I mean, and that's great. So you worked with an organization called Special Projects, which creates world-class public speakers. See, like again, this is another thing right here that I feel I align with, but what was the light bulb in 2017 that made you say, heck, I think I'm going to jump into tech, a tech job? And why did you choose the business development, sales development rep role?
So I was doing special projects at a company called Speaker Labs. And Speaker Labs is, in my opinion, like the best public speaking training in the world. They're unbelievable. I've watched them take people from people who are incredibly fearful to communicate in front of others to people who do it as best as they possibly can. So when I was in grad school, I was working for Speaker Labs, and they actually worked at a lot of different tech companies around Toronto. It's a natural fit because often tech companies want to grow their people. There's often a mindset of having them grow internally. Some of them might even have like a professional development or a learning credit. So one of those companies that Speaker Labs trained was Uberflip. And then when I graduated and I was looking for a place to start in tech, I reached out to some of those people that I knew, and that's how I ended up at Uberflip. Now, on the BDR side, on the SDR side, I actually didn't know that I wanted to be an SDR. So for me, it was the easiest way to get into tech. I started interviewing for customer success jobs and I actually had a little bit of trouble. And then I found that on the BDR side, people were very open to me doing it. So I realized the decision was on me a little bit. And so I interviewed at quite a few places. I wanted to see how it felt, what people were like, what was the energy at that company. And this was the one that really resonated with me. And I said, okay, I don't know if I want to do the sales development thing my entire career, but this would be a great place to start.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. And you mean you have your master's, it's just specifically was a master's in like more like informational side, the informational security or tech side.
Yeah, basically. So it's called a Master of Information, which could mean anything.
Okay.
Basically, what I did was I studied the social science of AI. That was something that I researched. I was in a program called Culture and Technology, where it's exactly what it sounds like, and that was the area I chose to go down. And that's another one of my decisions that's just kind of exploring things because tech is innovating at such a fast pace that I want to be able to keep up. And something like a sales engineer is maybe it's like 20 years old or 25 years old. It's not that old of a job. There's going to be work we're doing 30 years from now that doesn't exist today. So my master's helped give me the foundation of how technology affects society and has historically affected society, so I could have those conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. A thing I talked about with Ramsey of We the Sales and We the Sales Engineers, is this idea like as the future is going, I mean, the sales engineer is going to be needed. Whether or not we need the sales rep, because who's to say? Again, I don't want to scare anyone.
We will.
Yeah, I was.
We will need the sales rep.
The question I asked was, is the account executive going to be obsolete for some, if not a lot of tech companies? And is the solutions engineer going to be the role now? Because as companies are becoming more and more, sophisticated with technology, you're going to need someone who's going to need that technical acumen to tie it in with the business. And I mean, that's just a speculation. But I mean, I know for sure the sales engineer, solutions engineer is not going to go out. It's going to be needed more than ever.
Well, look at it this way.
Yeah.
A lot of tools are becoming really popular that are low code, for example. It's not that we don't need developers. It's that developers are spending less time on tasks that used to take longer. I still think account executives are going to be a very, very, very key role to the business. And the same thing with SEs. What we do might change over time. For example, there are platforms out there that do things like demo automation. So maybe taking some of those standard demos off of our plate. But all that means is that we're becoming more strategic and have to use even more of the human element. So I think both roles will be around for a very long time. Just what we do will evolve.
Yeah, that was another speculation too, was the idea of demos. Like, to what capacity are we going to be continuing to do, our sales engineers going to be doing demos? Because I knew of a VP whose initiative was to get rid of the demo in a sense. I don't know how far, but just meaning like, let's automate that. Let's throw that in an FAQ, throw that somewhere as a video, like a batch bundle or file, or where they can access videos. And if we need to do a demo, it'll be custom made. But yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that as well, the automation of demos. Speaking of roles, responsibilities for like BDRs, for the business development, sales development rep, what were you doing? Like, what were the roles and the assignments you had to do as a BDR at Uberflip?
For me, I mean, I know at some places they'll be like, hey, make your 100 calls and whatever a day. For me, there were a lot of different personalities on the team. And so it was very much focused on hitting your number as a BDR. So what that meant is finding opportunities out in the wild, however you need. Now, there are two approaches. There's the librarian. The librarian is trying to get hold of Tony. The librarian does a ton of research, looks up Tony's hometown, Tony's interests, everything he's ever written on the internet. And then the cowboy is out there with the lasso. The cowboy swings it. The cowboy tries to catch everything in sight. Not so much personalization, right? So one is a bit too much and one is maybe not enough. Mm-hmm. When I found my feet as a BDR SDR was right in the middle, where I could find a way to personalize, but not at a level that I'd only be writing like 1 or 2 emails a day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that actually came down to batching my activities. And when I say batching my activities, I mean, what I used to do is I would call somebody, email them, check my emails, maybe send a Slack or 2, then call someone, email them, check the email, send a Slack or 2, and then do it over again. When I started shutting down email, shutting down Slack, only doing one thing at once, so just calling or just emailing, then my productivity went through the roof and I would get way more done in a day. And as an SE, I've taken that with me, just focus. Turns out that multitasking, at least for me, is really, really hard.
Okay. Yeah. That this is interesting because a couple things came out of my head. You talked about the two kind of schools of thought. Some companies do love that whole spray and pray method. Get a whole bunch of people in your, get a whole bunch of like, personas or contacts or prospects in your cadence and just hope for the best. Just keep dialing and just burn up that phone.
And smiling.
Yeah. And then there's the other one where it's like, all right, well, let's be calculated about this, sit back, research, sometimes take a day or hour, just researching companies, personas, the individuals, learn everything about them. And I do believe that just fusing both of them works. Because, it's one thing. I know of an AE. He was once an SE and now he's an AE. I guess he said some of his outreach as an AE now. He does that outreach, cold calls and stuff. And he was asking, he's like, my problem is that I'll stay there and just research for freaking hours and days. And then when I finally craft up this nice email, no response. So it's just like, I think you just need a little bit of that. You need that calculation. You need that ability to be able to like research the people so you could say the right things so that, whenever you contact them, you're relevant. They understand you're not like blowing crap up their butt or whatever, smoke up their butt. And then also a little bit of the, not spray and pray, but just like that brute, like kind of aggressive, like go out there and make the calls. Because another thing too, I think about, he said was, and it's true, I knew this was going to be the thing, analysis paralysis is the thing that happens with people when people are like, well, I don't know, like you're sitting there so much on the defense or whatever that you're less on the offense that you just now are too much in your brain and now you can't even pick up the phone, send out an email. So I like your whole idea of fusing both the schools of thoughts together. I think that would create success.
And I mean, it's also, I'll tie it back to being an SE as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that worked for me as a BDR is also just the right touch pattern. As much as we want to believe that if if we research all day and write the nicest essay to somebody that it'll get the meeting, it might hit their email. The email might be rejected. You might have the wrong email. They might never see it. It might get lost somewhere. They might hit read by mistake. So by having a consistent touch pattern, what you do, especially working enterprise businesses, is you make yourself more visible. Now, as an SE, when I'm looking at opportunities that we're working, I also want to see that the momentum is there in these deals. So often I'll talk to my sales reps, and we'll sort of be analyzing, where are the gaps, where are the holes, what's happening here. And if we don't see that we're having regular conversations, or that this thing is trending like other good deals should, then that's a red flag for me. Similarly, like as a BDR, if you're not putting in the touches, if the timing isn't right, you might not get the meeting. As an AE or an SE, if the opportunity isn't trending the way you want it to, if the timing isn't right, then there might be some red flags that you should address.
That's awesome. And you having the previous experience as a BDR and now as an SE, like I mean, for me, like I'm thinking now, like when I see things go up the sales cycle and I look at what the BDR did, like I have some kind of empathy, for what the BDR did, because I have done it, I've walked the walk myself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could only imagine like how, understanding, and I'm not saying like, oh, how, like, you want to like rock them like a baby, but meaning like you feel, I don't know, I feel a little bit more involved. Like, so the question, I want to ask is like, you having that BDR experience, man, like I bet it gives you so much of a better, like holistic idea of like, what it is to being a BDR. Do you still have a relationship with your BDRs at Uberflip, or is that now like something that a different department, that's a little bit more split off from you?
It's not in my job description, but absolutely. I love working with the BDRs. I still think it's one of the hardest jobs in the world to maintain just that level of commitment day after day after day, when a lot of it might be out of your control. Mm-hmm. It's so hard. So whenever I can, I like to work with them. For me, what that means is early on when we hire BDRs, I'll sort of talk them through the marketing tech, our space. I'll talk them through the landscape a bit so they can understand where we fit in the market, technologies that we work with, things they should be looking out for. And then because I understand where they're coming from, I'll also translate it to what they need to know. For example, we integrate with what's called marketing automation platforms. Mm-hmm. I'll take them through what that integration is, and then I'll say, and here's what you need to know for your cold reach out. Because there's a translation step there as well. They don't need to know the nitty gritty of the integration, but they should know that we work with it, why we work with it, and what the value is.
Yeah, do you allow them to, so it's funny because I have my questions, of course, I wanted to ask, but it's kind of, it hits home for me, both these sides, the BDR and the SE. I'm going to get into this whole article that you wrote, but do you allow your BDRs to come on your disco, like at least the first calls? I mean, like, are you allowed to do that? I mean, I don't know. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we're not. Yeah, absolutely. We welcome our BDRs on our calls, because I think in a lot of cases, most BDRs want to get promoted to some sort of role, and most businesses are designed like that. Mm-hmm. That said, it could be a career job too, but for most BDRs that I've worked with, they want to move into something else eventually, okay? And a great way to do that is sitting in on these calls. And also, if you're on the call, I actually would like you to be involved. I don't just want you to just sit in and listen. I might have you take a certain part or jump in, ask a question here or there, because just sitting there doesn't really do anything. The live interactions of what somebody's saying, how you respond, can really help you grow as a BDR, as an AE, as an SE, as the customer success manager, whatever it is you're working towards.
That's awesome. I've been hearing, just like I'm hearing the functionality of each role. I mean, Sales engineer, it's synonymous with solution engineer, solutions consultant, sales consultant,
Yeah.
applications engineer, systems engineer. I mean, depend. And then also within that, there's sometimes a dichotomy. Like, found out at Datadog, they have a solutions engineer, and then they also have a sales engineer. And apparently the solutions engineer is doing more of the technical support, doing way more of the software stuff, while the sales engineer is doing more of the customer facing, the discovery, and the demos. I'm hearing, and maybe I got to get more clarity, but I'm hearing some BDR roles entail just like forming partnerships, not necessarily doing like crazy cold calling, but they're like already helping with our existing accounts. I mean, I know, like, I'm thinking about expansion, working with existing accounts and helping to grow within that. But I'm hearing that there's just a slight take on the BDR role and not necessarily doing, because whenever I think BDR, I'm thinking they're doing cold calls, brute force outreach,
Sure.
very sales. But then there's this other side that I'm hearing that sounds a little bit more like, I don't know, it seems like the less brute force, the nice, the more like, oh, don't worry, you and I were allies here. Let me see how I can help you, kind of like feel. So I don't know.
Yeah, at the same time, as an AE, let me be an AE, an account manager, a key account director focused on strategic, like,
Yeah.
we need better definitions. That said, the reason why often I will say BDR or SDR is because some companies might have business development roles, which are actually just partnership roles. They're not cold calling or emailing at all. These are partnership specific roles. So business development as a way to find partners to work with. You could also have partner like BDRs or SDRs who are reaching out themselves. So I think it's important whenever we're talking about these roles that we define them. And you're right, from company to company, it's going to change.
Yeah. So speaking of this, your trajectory, right? And just, of course, inspiration for people too, who are already either in the role or may say, hey, I want to get in this role to ultimately get to where you are. You wrote an article on LinkedIn for sales development reps who want to become sales engineers. How were you able to rise the ranks of being a business development rep or sales development rep, and then being a sales engineer at your company? Like, what were the things you studied, shadowed, et cetera, to make you successful from being promoted from BDR to sales engineer?
So I've got a few tips on how to go from BDR or SDR to sales engineer or solution consultant. And this is really good internally. Externally, you like, if you want to get promoted internally from SDR to SE, this works really well. If you want to go from SDR to SE elsewhere, you can take some of these tips. So first is table stakes, hit your number. It's very hard to make an argument at a company that you're ready for the next role until you're crushing it in your current one. Okay. So that one is just basic. Second, and maybe I should have said this first, is make sure it's what you want to do, not necessarily for the next 20 years, but for the next year or two, something that you really want to dig your teeth into. I mean, SaaS is changing so much. Focus on getting this thing done and why you want to do it. For me, I wanted the sales side and the technical side. So I had my cake and I ate it too, in that sense. Mentorship, obviously, finding a mentor, building POCs. Okay, so that's another SE term that could be a million different things depending on your industry, depending on where you work. For me, and the way we build proof of concepts, I could do that as a BDR. That's not available to everyone, but find out what you can do in the platform. Maybe you can just get a sandbox account that other BDRs wouldn't necessarily have access to. Maybe you can help the SEs build that POC. Maybe you could shadow it. Find a way to be involved so you can do the job before you have the job, because it's way easier to make the argument for it if you're already doing it. Two other things, industry certifications are big in the SE world. For me, one of the marketing automation platforms we work with is called Marketo. They're owned by Adobe. So I got certified as a Marketo expert. That helped me make the case. But whether it's through the pre-sales collective, they do a lot of SE certs, whether it's through a specific technology in your industry, do that. And also work with your account executive, because generally the SDR account executive partnership is one where you can focus on where you need to go. I worked with my AEs and I said, hey, I want to be a sales engineer. Can you help me get there? Probably going to say yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, again, like I had these questions, but this just holds so closely to me. When I started on this new project, a manufacturing software simulation product, my AE said, he goes, I know you don't want to be in this role forever. What are your goals? And I told him I want to be an SE. I want to be a full-fledged SE. I want to be in the role. And he said, okay, great. Well, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you, to ensure that you're successful. So I remember also having to ask him after reading your article, I said, hey, I would like to be able to be part of the RFI process. So he's been at least allowing me to share, he's been sharing it with me, talking it over with me. I guess at the company that I'm part of, they don't necessarily allow you to like write anything in there unless you're like the SE himself or the AE.
Sure.
But he, the fact that I'm able to just look at that and see that process going is great. Like it's just a new thing that I wasn't able to do before. And so this is awesome to be able to do that. Another thing too is the certifications. Yeah, like getting the certifications, I feel like just gives you more of a foundation of just an idea of just how to work with tech and stuff. So like this is another cool thing that I really appreciate.
And you made a great point. So the blog is on the Pre-Sales Collective if anybody wants to check it out. But you pointed out a big gap. RFIs, RFPs, absolutely an area that is not in that article that should be. 100% doing those is another way to do the job before you have the job.
Yeah. So you currently work at Uberflip, which is a content experience platform. Let's pretend I was working on a radio or TV show. How would you explain to me what Uberflip is? How would it work for a radio or TV show?
So in a B2B buyer's journey or any complex journey, it takes a lot of content to get someone to the place where they're ready to talk to sales or ready to purchase. And when we say content, it means fully baked marketing assets, ebooks, blogs, white papers, podcasts, anything that's going to move someone through that buyer journey. Now, typically what people do is they just pop that piece of content online. What Uberflip is a content experience platform that allows you to take that piece of content and create personalized content experiences at every stage. So let me give you an example. People spend a ton of money on data to identify who their best buyers are. And then they spend a ton of money on channels, ads, emails, search to actually get clicks from those accounts. But then the destination isn't personalized. That's where we come in to make sure that once you have somebody's attention, you can get them to binge on content and get deeper into their education journey with your business at every touch point.
So I remember with HubSpot inbound certification, there's types of personas. There's the people who are tire kickers. They're like, I have an issue, but I really don't want to like conclude yet who I want to work with, what I want to have. There's the ones who say, I don't even know what kind of issue I have. And then there's the one that's like, dude, I have an issue. Freaking, I need help now. At least those are the like, few personas I found. Is that what Uberflip is working on? Like making sure that they tailor their experience within each persona?
Yeah, but even beyond that, it could be persona, it could be industry, it could be the account or business that you're at. So if you think about all the places where content lives, on your website, maybe microsites, maybe landing pages, maybe custom account-based pages, sales is probably sharing content, it's everywhere. So how do you create an experience that drives revenue, that's personalized, and that affects all those different stages? So absolutely, we can create pages for different personas, but also with the right recommendations for industry or account or wherever somebody is in their journey.
Awesome. I have a few more questions left.
Yeah.
Is that cool? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Huh?
I'm good for time.
Okay, cool. So when looking at social media platforms, say at a spot, so I'm thinking about this first, like you're a scholar. I'm going to call you a scholar. You also had done
I'm flattered.
Huh?
I'm flattered.
Yes, because you've done a presentation in 2017 for the Canadian Communications Association annual meeting titled Social Media for Social Media's Sake and Ethical Usage. And you've published a scholarly article in 2018 called Facebook for Facebook's Sake and Aesthetic Usage. What were these studies about?
Okay. On Hot, do you ever watch Hot Ones?
Yeah.
So on Hot Ones, sometimes
I'm thinking of myself right now. I'm thinking of him and myself.
yeah, because so what happens on that show is they have celebrities eating hot wings with even hotter questions, right? And sometimes the host pulls these questions out of nowhere, and they're like, "Well, I don't know how you," but anyway. So yes, my research in grad school, very simply, social science of AI. As a part of that, I did this study, which the presentation and the paper were both on, combining the English lit theory with social media in a way. So there's this theory of aestheticism, which is basically art for art's sake. So it's the idea that instead of looking at a painting and trying to pull out a lesson from it or a moral or a reason or something that it's teaching you, that painting can exist for the beauty of itself. Okay. So this thing is beautiful and that's enough. I don't need it to teach me about the world. There's inherent value in that. Now, at the same time, this is a totally different topic. There's this thing called prosumerism, which is the idea that when you're a consumer on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you're using their platforms, they're actually making money off your usage, okay? So the same way that you get customized ads on Facebook, somebody's paying Facebook for that ad, right? So a lot of people have an issue with this, and they say, well, people should get paid to use these platforms. I wrote a paper about how currently this is an issue. So how should people use Facebook today? And I proposed an aesthetic usage, which is basically this is oversimplified, but we're way deep in the research now. Use the social media for your own enjoyment, just because it has value in itself. And by doing that, you actually take some of that power back from the platforms. That's my 2-minute overview of the in the weeds research there. I think the paper is on my LinkedIn if you want to read something quite deep on some very obscure topics. But isn't all research like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly a scholarly journal. I mean, you have the abstract, the intros, using the theories proposed before you get into your literature review and everything like that. I mean, it's out, it's there, and that's cool. Now, is this bound in a book, or is this just more like in digitally, like shelves?
No, this is a digital journal.
Cool.
I think it was through Simon Fraser University. I gotta open it up. I haven't looked at it in years.
So if you were looking at these two studies, or if we were looking, by saying these things right here, if we were looking from the user by way of being a social media influencer, and I guess, how about this? Let's get even more granular. Say you're a BDR or a sales engineer, social media influencer. You're posting your stuff on social media. What type of advice would you give to that person based on the theories and statements in that article?
It's not an exact link there. I think the message would be enjoy yourself, because a lot of these platforms are built around an amount of comparison. Hey, how am I doing versus this other person who's getting more likes, more comments, whatever. I think that's part of the unhealthy aspect of social media. Just focus on yourself and doing better than you used to be. If your goal is to go viral, go for it, but try and get better than you used to be. Don't focus on how somebody else is doing, because it's just not healthy, and then you're just clicking and scrolling the whole time. I sound like one of those, that sort of caricature of the person from like 100 years ago, like these kids on their phones, but enjoy it, have fun, you know?
That's awesome. So when looking at social media platforms, say as a BDR or a sales engineer,
Yeah.
professional who wants to post things online to market themselves, see, like all this stuff I feel like is relevant, especially to like your trajectory, what you're doing, the company.
Sure.
Like if this person wants
Yeah, I
to,
work in marketing technology, right?
yeah. So like say, you know, me, I want to market myself so that I look good in
Yeah.
the eyes of whoever wants to hire me as a BDR, sales engineer, any pre-sales professional. What would you say are the do's and don'ts for social media?
Do value your own opinion. It is worthwhile to share it with the world. People will be interested in it. Everyone has a unique point of view. Don't say controversial things just to say controversial things. It's great to have an opinion, but if you're just doing it to get engagement, it's not authentic. Do share things about what you're doing, what's your specific journey. So for me, that's going from SDR to SE and maybe what's next for me. Don't try and be Dave Gerhardt. He's a big B2B marketing influencer before you've been a marketing leader, right? Like this guy's the one of the head marketers at Drift, amazing brand. Nice. Don't try and do that before you're there. I would also, specific to SDRs and BDRs, and this is my opinion only, don't go for the meeting as soon as you add somebody on LinkedIn. Build up some rapport with them. It's this weird middle ground between business and social.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's amazing for getting them to recognize your name, comment on their posts, engage with them, but don't say, hey, Tony, let's connect, whatever, and then immediately be like, hey, I thought you'd be interested in this because of XYZ. Now take a meeting with me. It's not genuine. It's not authentic. But what you can be is yourself, your authentic self on LinkedIn. So do that.
It's awesome. You wrote an article where you stated in your previous life, you studied how humans interact with technology. And one of your focuses was on the user experience. I find this so awesome, UX. In your words, what does user experience mean? And how has that made an impact on your life?
Okay, so I actually wrote an article about where user experience design and content experience come together. I have an issue with people using UX and UI interchangeably. UI is the interface, it's what's there. UX includes the UI, but it's also the experience and the psychology of design around it. So for example, when you go up to a door, how often do you push it when it's a pull?
How often do you push it? Do I push it?
Sure, I know for me, I don't know, maybe it's safer. I know for me, it happens all the time.
I'm inward.
You always go inward? Okay.
So not always, it depends. I mean, I think I've learned through time, it's about me push, it depends. If it's a household door, I think it's inward. And depending if I'm leaving out the door, it's inward. But if I'm at a mall or someplace where there's glass, like, you know, sliding door or glass door, I'll assume it's pushing out. I'm so sorry. I guess it all depends, but yeah, you just brought something that's interesting. Why do you ask?
Okay. So you just described all the different scenarios. What should happen is that the design of it should make it obvious. It should be very clear to you whether you push or pull. And I would argue, and maybe this is somebody who screws it up a lot, that if I don't know whether to push or pull, that's the designer's fault. So that's the experience around it. If we're thinking more in the SaaS world, is this thing easy to use for you? What is it like? And do you require training? If you have a platform that isn't that obvious in how to use, that's something to recognize. If you have amazing data, but it's not easy to navigate, or it's not presented in a way where the experience around it makes sense, then that's a problem. Here's another example. There's a reason why phone numbers are 7 digits, because we used to remember people's phone numbers. And 7 is the maximum number of items that the brain can remember. Once we get into 10 or 11, it's very, very hard to remember sequences like that. So how do you take something like that and incorporate it into design? Well, maybe it's on your website. Maybe you don't have more than 7 tabs where you can click through, or 7 options in your global navigation. So those are the things I'm thinking about with user experience. And then that will cascade down into things like user interfaces that people are designing.
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, that's super important. And how are you working with UX at Uberflip?
So content experience should incorporate user experience into it. So there are a couple different parts of this. We have a customer facing side of our platforms. Let's say you create a microsite for somebody. It should have great user experience. It should be very obvious for somebody reading content how to get to the next piece, how to navigate, how to placemaking. Like, it should be obvious where they are on the web. Similarly, within our platform, it should be really obvious for the marketer to create these experiences. So how do you generate ways where the user experience for the marketer is great? And a lot of this, one of the funny things about great design is a lot of it's hidden. So if it's all easy to use, it should just be easy to use and maybe not that obvious either. When something's hard to use, then the red flags come up. So how do you eliminate red flags as well? So that's kind of the connection. Content, both on the customer facing side, being easy to navigate, and for the marketer, easy to create.
Yeah. I'll be honest, like, I think UX is super important, but I still believe some people leave it out or they just don't consider it. I mean, I think it's just super important. I mean, I'm thinking of my parents who are in their 60s and them trying to use something. Like, you have to keep that. You have to be considerate of the user experience for them. But obviously it depends on the product, depends on the demographic. Nevertheless, we still have to be in the minds of this demographic that we're serving. I mean, because, I remember when I was a sales engineer intern, I was able to help the product team be able to use less prompts because we got into an API specification where the user had to click so many times to get to their desired location.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we consolidate that all into one click? And so that was a change, and I was happy to see that change. But for me too, I'm always doing that, especially with Sales Loft. I've spoken with the people at Sales Loft. I've had meetings with them saying, like, guys, there's so much crap going on. How do you improve this experience for a BDR who's doing their cold calls and just constantly just using this, this call method? So, I mean, I really feel UX should be like top of mind when it comes to, making a product.
I actually think they've done a really nice job with their rebrand.
Oh yeah.
I think they've created something pretty special there. What I would bring it to, though, is more of a B2C example. Now, I've been with my girlfriend for a very long time, but I remember Tinder, and the reason why Tinder was so successful. It's just easy. Like, how about that experience where you don't have to think, you just go? And yes, there are a million different problems with that. Yep. But like, mobile dating like that is just so much easier because of the great user experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So with you hosting radio and TV shows and public speaking organizations, how have these experiences helped you being a BDR, just looking at a BDR?
Storytelling comes into play in almost every single thing you do in business, at least customer facing, and just having the experience of not so much crushing it on the radio or this thing I used to host, just failing. It's great to fail. I've gone up and done stand-up and sucked at it.
Nice.
Like, it's having these experiences really helps to refine and get better at telling a story and telling it succinctly. So the more you can get out and the more you can try and be in front of an audience or people, the better you are in other aspects.
Wow. And how has the TV and radio show experiences helped you as being an SE, a sales engineer?
Same thing. It's important to take the technology and be able to tell a great story about how somebody didn't have it, did have it, and won. And so taking that idea and implementing it probably all stems from experience talking.
Awesome. So you're an accredited librarian.
Sure.
So it's good to know you're a book lover. I got a couple here, but I want to ask, I want to break it into a two-part question. What would be your favorite books? What have been your favorite books from your grade school years right before your first tech job in 2017?
100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez is one of the best books ever written. It's about many generations of a family in the fictional town of Macondo. He won the Nobel Prize largely for this being his major work. It's amazing. Without spoiling too much, I will never look at ice the same way.
Ice.
Wow.
That's crazy. Wow. Okay. And then what have been your favorite books from the moment you got your first tech job in 2018 until now?
So this seems like it's a question sort of aiming at like tech books and sales books, and there are some great ones.
No,
but they're not. Let me shout out the John Kerr Mastering Technical Sales. There's a reason why that's the sales engineering Bible. It's unbelievable. That really helped me. But since then, what are some great? How about The Idiots? Oh, you got it. How about the Idiot by Dostoevsky? That book took me years to get through. It's a book about what happens to somebody who's a wholly innocent man, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting to watch people try, in some cases succeed, and in some cases fail to take advantage of him. That is a heck of a novel, The Idiot.
You said you touched up on some other names. I remember in college, I had my first piece of philosophy books, and Friedrich Nietzsche still sticks in me still to this day, just for his way of thinking. And you just reminded me, after these slew of technical sales books, I want to get back into reading those books, including a fictional book. So yeah, I think,
and I mean, I think there's a balance also. Yeah. Like I'm not somebody who will discount an entire genre, but for every like nonfiction sales or SaaS or sales engineering book I read, which I do a lot of, I like to mix in some of the fiction because I've gotten away from it in years past, and it really is, it's special to get deep in a book, especially like class. I'm a big nerd, Tony.
That's awesome. I love it.
It's special to get deep there. So Dune is coming out, the movie, I think this weekend. And I always like to get the book before the movie, but I never, ever finish it, ever. But this time I finished Dune before the movie. It's as good as people say. It lived up to the hype. It really is one of the best science fiction books I've ever read.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been encouraged, and it just reminded me again how fictional books also can help with your creativity. I do notice that like the nonfiction books, especially in the personal development, business, entrepreneurship, kind of has like a linear thing. Like there's just like not necessarily all these ebbs and flows. And so it's just a reminder that like it's good to also add in a couple fictional books in your arsenal.
Well, let me throw one out there. The Chris Voss. What is it called?
Never Split the Difference.
Never Split the Difference. I know that's a common one, but he writes it so well with his stories, and that's part of the reason why it's resonated with so many people. He doesn't start with, "Hey, ask calibrated questions." He starts the chapter with a story about how he used this skill to get this thing done, and then explains it. And I think that's so effective.
Have you heard this guy talk? I want to be friends with him. I don't know why. Maybe because he has the New York accent, and also the way he talks, he sounds like he's just like the common person. And I'm just like, dude, I actually want to be friends with Chris Voss. He just sounds so cool.
Yeah, who doesn't? That's part of his effect.
Yeah. And lastly, man, I of course, I want to help these people, get into the tech world, consider pre-sales, BDR, SE. Where can people find or contact you if they want to, learn more about what you do, ask you maybe a couple questions? Like, where can they find you? Where can they contact you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, at Kevin Jacobs, and then what is I don't even know what my Twitter is, but that's a good place to find me as well. Usually, just I'm less of a tweeter and more of a liker at Kevin Ted Jacobs. I'm on Twitter as well. Either one of those, especially anybody who's like early SE career or looking to make the jump from SDR to SE. I'm around. I'm always happy to have those conversations. And part of why I wrote that article for the Pre-Sales Collective is because a lot of people were reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm an SDR. I want to do this thing. Do you have any advice?"
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of valuable information. And yeah, if you guys like this, please leave a like and comment which was the most interesting part of this chat. Talk to you guys soon. Take care.
Thanks.